I drove back to Harborside, expecting champagne and a promotion. The reward for 2 years of sleepless nights and a graduate degree I earned while working full-time. I thought I was finally ready to lead Foster Marine Supply. Instead, I walked into an ambush. My father had quietly signed away my birthright to my younger sister, and when I dared to ask why, my mother delivered the line that ended my childhood. "You should be grateful we gave you anything." The tires of my Honda CR-V hummed against the asphalt of Route 1, a monotonous drone that felt less like travel and more like a decompression chamber. I had the window down an inch, just enough to let the scent of the salt marsh bleed into the car. It was a smell that only existed here in Harborside, Massachusetts. It was briny, sulfurous, and cold. To a tourist, it smelled like low tide. To me, it smelled like the finish line. I reached over to the passenger seat and rested my hand on the leather folder sitting there. Inside was a piece of parchment that had cost me $70,000 and 2 years of my life. Master of Business Administration, Concentration in Operations Management. I had finished the program while working 40 hours a week as a logistics coordinator for a tech firm in Boston, sleeping an average of 4 hours a night. Fueled by caffeine and a singular driving ambition, I was coming home. This was not just a visit. This was the pivot. That was what my father, Robert, and I had called it 3 years ago. The business, Foster Marine Supply, had been bleeding cash then. I had taken a leave of absence from my previous job, moved back into my childhood bedroom, and spent 12 months brutally streamlining the inventory. I cut the dead weight. I renegotiated contracts with the rope manufacturers in Rhode Island. I digitized 50 years of paper invoices. I saved the ship. When I left to go back to Boston and get my degree, the understanding was unspoken but solid. I would go get the credentials. I would learn the high-level strategy that my father, a man who still used a calculator with a paper tape, did not possess. Then I would come back. I would take the helm as general manager, and eventually, I would buy him out so he could retire to his woodworking. I checked my watch. 5 in the afternoon. I was exhausted. My eyes felt gritty, but beneath the fatigue, there was a quiet, burning pride. I had done it. I had run the marathon, and now I was driving toward the podium. I pulled off the highway and navigated the winding, tree-lined roads that led toward the coast. The houses got larger, the driveways longer. Harborside was a town of old money and new pretension, but the Fosters were neither. We were the people who sold the rich people the anchors for their yachts. We were service staff with a better credit rating. I turned into the driveway of the gray-shingled colonial that I had grown up in. The lawn was manicured within an inch of its life. My mother, Elaine, treated the hydrangeas like prize show dogs. They were blooming aggressively in blue and purple. Guarding the front porch, I killed the engine. Silence rushed in to fill the cabin. I took a deep breath, grabbed my leather portfolio, and stepped out. The front door opened before I reached the steps. Elaine stood there. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere cardigan and white linen trousers, an outfit that dared the world to spill coffee on it. Her hair was a stiff, perfect helmet of blonde highlights. "Sarah." She came down the steps. Arms open, I braced myself for the hug. It was light, perfumed, and brief. She pulled back and held me at arm's length, her eyes scanning my face. My hair, my blazer. "You look tired," she said. "I drove straight from the city. Mom, and I just finished finals 3 days ago." "Well, go wash your face. The neighbors are coming over for a drink in an hour to congratulate you, and I want a picture by the hydrangeas while the light is still good." I blinked. I expected a quiet dinner, a strategy session with Dad. "Neighbors?" I asked. "Just the Millers and the Shepherds. They want to hear all about it." She didn't ask about the ceremony. She didn't ask about my grades. She turned and walked back into the house, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I followed her inside. The house smelled of lemon polish and roasting chicken. It was aggressively clean, the kind of clean that made you nervous to put a glass down without a coaster. "Dad?" I called out. "In the den." My father's voice came back. It sounded muffled. I walked through the kitchen. passing the island where a charcuterie board was already laid out with geometrical precision. I found my father in the den, sitting in his leather armchair, staring at the television. It was turned off. "Hey, Dad." He jumped, just slightly, as if I had woken him from a dream. He turned, and I saw the lines etched deep around his eyes. He looked older than he had a month ago. His hair, usually combed back neatly, looked thin. "Sarah, you made it." He stood up, his movements stiff, and hugged me. His hug was tighter than Mom's, but there was a tremor in his hands. He patted my back, a rhythmic, anxious thumping. "So," I said, pulling back and smiling, "it is done. The degree is in the car. Good. That is good. Hard work pays off." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked past my shoulder, toward the window. "I wanted to talk to you tonight," I said, keeping my voice low. "Before the neighbors get here, I have some ideas about the Q3 vendor struggle you mentioned on the phone last week. If we shift the payment terms with Sampson Cordage, we can free up about 12% of the cash flow for the winter stock." Robert flinched. It was a small motion, a tightening of the jaw. "Not tonight, Sarah. Let us just have a nice dinner. Your mother worked hard on the chicken." I felt a prick of irritation, but I smoothed it over. He was probably just tired. The business had always been stressful for him. That was why I was here, to take the weight. "Okay," I said. "I will go put my bag in the guest room." My room. It was always my room. But since I moved to Boston, Mom called it the guest room. I walked up the stairs. The carpet soft under my boots. I tossed my bag onto the bed and splashed water on my face in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles. Yes. But a sharp jawline and eyes that didn't miss much. I looked like a woman who could run a company. I went back downstairs, intending to leave a small gift I had bought for Dad on his desk. It was a vintage brass compass I had found in a shop in Beacon Hill. A symbol. Here is to the new direction. I walked down the hallway to the home office. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The office smelled like pipe tobacco and cedar, the scent of my childhood. It was a masculine room, lined with bookshelves and charts of the Atlantic coast. I stepped toward the heavy oak desk to place the wrapped box on the blotter. That was when I saw it. It was hanging on the wall behind the desk, right next to the photograph of my grandfather, Thomas Foster, standing on the deck of his first trawler. It was a framed document, a certificate of good standing from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But it was not the old one. This one was dated 2 weeks ago. I leaned in, squinting. Foster Marine Supply, LLC, Manager, Madison Foster. I froze. My eyes darted to the corkboard next to the desk. There was a printed org chart pinned there, the paper bright white and fresh. At the top, in a box labeled Managing Partner/Majority Owner, was the name Madison Foster. Below it, in a smaller box labeled Consultant, Advisory, was Robert Foster. My name was nowhere. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. Madison? My sister was 29. She worked as a receptionist at a yoga studio in Providence. She had never reconciled a ledger in her life. She thought net 30 was a tennis score. I stared at the chart for a long time. The room seemed to tilt. This had to be a mistake, a placeholder. Maybe they needed a female name on the paperwork for a minority business grant and I wasn't a resident? No, that made no sense. I turned around, the compass still in my hand. I walked out of the office, my steps heavy. I found them in the kitchen. Elaine was arranging crackers. Robert was pouring a glass of scotch. I stood in the doorway. "Dad?" He turned, glass in hand. He saw my face and he knew. He took a long swallow of the scotch. "Why is Madison listed as the managing partner on the wall in the office?" I asked. My voice was steady, but it sounded thin to my own ears. Elaine didn't look up from the crackers. Robert sighed. He set the glass down. "We did some restructuring. Sarah, while you were away." "Restructuring?" I walked into the room. "You transferred ownership to Madison?" "It is for succession planning." Robert mumbled. "Succession planning?" I repeated, I am the succession plan. That was the deal. I went to get the degree so I could run the company. I spent a year fixing the supply chain. Madison? Madison doesn't know the difference between a cleat and a bollard. Sarah, keep your voice down, Elaine said, finally looking up. Her eyes were hard. Blue ice. No, I said. I will not keep my voice down. I just drove 2 hours to come home and start my life. And I find out you gave the company to my sister? Why? It made sense, Robert said, his voice pleading. You were busy. You were in Boston with your big corporate job. Madison was here. She wanted to help. She wanted to help? I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Since when? Since she stepped up, Elaine said. She has been coming into the office 3 days a week for the last month. A month? I stared at them. I have been working toward this for 10 years. It is done. Sarah, Elaine said. She wiped her hands on a towel. The papers are signed. Madison is the owner. Your father needed to step back. The stress was killing him. I looked at my father. He was studying his shoes again. So why not me? I asked. Why not call me? I would have come home that night. We did not want to disturb your studies, Robert said weakly. That is a lie, I said. I felt the heat rising in my chest. You transferred the family business, a business I saved, to someone who is completely unqualified. And you did not even tell me? Elaine slammed the towel onto the counter. Stop it, she snapped. Stop acting like a martyr. You have your degree. You have your fancy job in the city. You have a whole life that has nothing to do with us. Madison needed this. She needed a purpose. We gave her one. She needed a purpose? I whispered. It is a marine supply company. Mother, it is not a therapy dog. It involves people's livelihoods. It involves complex logistics. She will run it into the ground. She will learn, Robert shouted. It was the first time he had raised his voice. He looked terrified. She will learn. We have hired advisors to help her. I looked between them. The betrayal was so absolute, so physical, that I felt nauseous. I did everything you asked. I said, everything, and then Elaine delivered the line. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. The way one looks at a guest who has overstayed their welcome. You should be grateful we gave you anything, she said. The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. Anything? I asked. What did you give me? We gave you the freedom to leave, she said. I opened my mouth to respond, to scream, to flip the charcuterie board, but the front door opened. Hi, a voice called out. Madison. She walked into the kitchen a moment later. She was wearing a beige blazer that looked expensive and oversized. The sleeves rolled up. Her hair was done in loose waves. She looked like she was playing dress-up as a businesswoman. Oh, Sarah, you are here. She came over and hugged me. I stood rigid as a statue. She smelled of vanilla vape smoke and expensive perfume. She pulled back, beaming. She looked manic. Her eyes were too wide, her smile too fixed. Did you tell her? Madison asked, looking at Mom. We told her, Elaine said, her voice instantly softening into honey. Isn't it exciting? Madison squealed. She grabbed my hand. I am a boss babe now. Can you believe it? No, I said, pulling my hand away. I cannot. Madison's face fell. She looked at Mom. Why is she being like this? She is just tired, Elaine said soothingly. I am not tired. I turned to Madison. What is our current operating margin on diesel engine parts? Madison blinked. What? The margin. I said. What is the markup? I do not know the exact number right now. She stammered. Trent handles the numbers. Who is Trent? I asked. He is the advisor, Madison said, recovering her defensive posture. He is from the Bramwell Group. He is amazing. He says we are going to pivot to a lifestyle brand. A lifestyle brand? I felt like I was having a stroke. We sell shackles and fishnets. Madison. To fishermen. Well, Trent says the real money is in apparel and branding. She said, crossing her arms, you are so old school. Sarah. That is why Dad gave it to me. We need fresh energy. I looked at my father. He was pouring another scotch. His hand was shaking so badly the bottle clinked against the glass. "Dinner is ready," Elaine announced. "Let us sit. The neighbors will be here at 7. Put a smile on. Sarah, do not ruin this night for your sister." We sat at the dining room table. The roast chicken was dry. The conversation was a minefield. I tried to eat. I really did. I cut the meat into tiny squares. "So, Sarah," Madison said, her mouth full, "are you going to stay in Boston? Or are you going to move back here and, find a husband?" "I am working in Boston." I said, "See," Elaine said, "you have your own life. Madison is the one who is here." I looked at my father. "Dad, seriously, the accounts? Who is checking the accounts if Madison doesn't know the margins?" "Stop it," Robert said. "I'm not trying to be difficult." I said, "But if you have an advisor pushing a rebrand, you need to be careful. Consultants bleed cash. You are always so intense," Elaine said, shaking her head. "Even when you were little, always counting, always correcting people. I am trying to protect the business." I said, "You think you are better than us." Madison sneered. "You think because you have a master's degree you are the only one who can do anything. Well, guess what? I signed 3 checks today. It is not that hard." "You signed checks?" I asked. "For what?" "Vendors," she said. "Which vendors?" "I do not remember their names. Trent put them in front of me and I signed them. That is what a CEO does. She delegates." I put my fork down. The clatter echoed in the room. "You are signing checks you do not understand." I said, "Sarah, that is enough." Elaine slammed her hand on the table. "You are jealous. It is ugly. You cannot stand that your sister is finally shining. You want her to fail. I do not want her to fail." I said, "I want the company not to go bankrupt." "It is fine," Robert shouted. He stood up. His face was red. "Everything is fine. Stop asking questions. Just stop." He threw his napkin on his plate and walked out of the room. Elaine glared at me. "Look what you did. You upset your father." I stood up. I could not breathe in there. "I'm going to get some air." I walked out the back door onto the deck. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. The air was cold. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. I felt erased. 33 years of being the responsible one, the one who studied, the one who saved money, the one who fixed the messes. And in one afternoon, they had rewritten history to make me the villain and Madison the savior. I needed a sanity check. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my contacts until I found Nora Keene. Nora had been the office manager at Foster Marine for 20 years. She had practically raised me. She had retired 6 months ago, or so I thought. I hit dial. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was hesitant. "Nora, it is Sarah." "Oh, Sarah. Honey." She sounded wary. That scared me more than anything else. "I am at the house." I said, "I saw the org chart." "Madison? Really?" Silence on the line. Then a heavy sigh. "You found out." "Nora, what is going on?" I asked. "Why would Dad do this?" "Madison can't run a lemonade stand." "Sarah, listen to me," Nora said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I did not retire." "What? I quit?" she said. "I quit because I could not watch it anymore." "Watch what?" "Your dad," she said. "He has been different since Christmas. Jumpy, secretive. And that man, that Trent fellow, he is in the office every day. He has the run of the place. But why Madison?" "Because she signs whatever they put in front of her." Nora said, "She doesn't read it. You read everything." I felt a chill go down my spine. "Nora, are they in trouble?" "I do not know," she said. "They locked me out of the books in February. But Sarah?" "Yeah? Your dad has been scared for months, real scared, like a man looking over his shoulder." My stomach twisted. "Scared of what?" "I do not know, but be careful. Honey, do not push them too hard tonight. The air in that house is bad." I heard the back door slide open behind me. "I have to go." "Nora." I hung up and turned around. It was Madison. She held a glass of wine. "Mom says you have to come inside." She said, "The Millers are here. They want to see the graduate." She said the word graduate with a twist of mockery. "I am coming." I said, "I survived the next 2 hours." I smiled. I shook hands. I accepted congratulations from neighbors who looked at me with vague pity, as if they knew something I didn't. Elaine held court, her arm linked through Madison's, telling everyone how Madison was taking the reins of the legacy. Robert sat in the corner, drinking steadily. By 10 o'clock, the house was empty. I went upstairs. I needed to leave. I needed to get back to Boston. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to know what was happening. I walked into my bedroom. It was a time capsule of my high school years. Debate trophies, field hockey ribbons, books on maritime law. I sat on the edge of the twin bed. My mind was racing. Scared for months. Advisors, signing checks without reading. I looked at the bookshelf. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind a row of yearbooks, was a wooden box where I used to keep my treasures as a kid. Sea glass, shark teeth. I knelt down and pulled the box out. I just wanted to hold something that felt real. Something from a time before I was a guest in my own family. I opened the lid. Sitting on top of the sea glass was a white envelope. It was thick. On the front, in handwriting that made my heart stop, were the words, "Sarah, do not open." It was my grandfather's handwriting. He had been dead for 10 years. I picked it up. The paper felt old. But then I noticed something. The flap of the envelope was sealed, but the paper around the seal was torn slightly. The glue was jagged. It had been opened, and then it had been glued shut again. Recently, I could tell because a tiny smudge of fresh, clear adhesive had squeezed out from the side and dried shiny against the matte paper. Someone had read this, and then they had put it back, hoping I would never look in a box of childhood junk. I stared at the envelope, my name, his handwriting. I didn't open it, not yet. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my blazer. I stood up. The fatigue was gone. In its place was a cold, sharp clarity. They told me to be grateful they gave me anything. They were about to find out exactly what they had given me. They had given me a reason to fight. I turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the window frames. Downstairs, I heard my father drop a glass. It shattered. Nobody moved to clean it up. The next morning, the harbor was wrapped in a thick gray fog that tasted of salt and diesel. I drove my Honda to the Foster Marine Supply warehouse at 7 o'clock. A habit ingrained in me from the year I spent turning the company around. The warehouse was a sprawling corrugated metal beast sitting right on the water, its loading docks facing the gray Atlantic. It was the place where I had learned to walk, where I had learned to count, and where I had expected to spend the rest of my life. Now, I parked in the visitor lot. My reserved spot, the one painted with S, Foster, had been painted over in black. The fresh paint was still glossy, a wet scar on the asphalt. I walked through the front glass doors. The reception desk was empty, which was the first bad sign. In a logistics business, if the phones were not being answered at 7 in the morning, you were already losing money. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and industrial rubber, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Neglect. The ficus plant in the corner was dead, its leaves brown and brittle on the carpet. I bypassed the reception and walked straight down the hallway to the executive suite. The carpet was worn in a path down the center, a track beaten by 3 generations of Fosters. I knocked once on my father's door and pushed it open. Robert was sitting behind his desk, but he was not working. He was staring at a paperweight, a glass sphere with a preserved crab inside, and spinning it slowly with his thumb. When I entered, he stopped. "Good morning, Dad," I said, closing the door behind me. "Sarah, you are up early." I sat in the leather chair opposite him. It creaked. I folded my hands on my lap, channeling every ounce of professional detachment I had learned in Boston. "I want to see the transfer documents," I said. Robert sighed, a long, rattling exhalation that seemed to deflate his entire posture. He picked up a pen and clicked it. Click, Click, click. We went over this last night. Sarah, it is done. I know it is done. I said, I want to see how it was done. I want to see the operating agreement. I want to see the valuation. If you transferred a controlling interest to Madison, there had to be a valuation for tax purposes. Who did the audit? We did not need a full audit, he said, avoiding my eyes. It was an internal family transfer. A gift. A gift of an asset worth millions? I asked. The IRS has opinions on that, Dad. And more importantly, the bank does. Does First Harbor Bank know you changed the guarantors on the commercial lines of credit? His hand spasmed. Just a twitch. But I saw it. The pen clattered to the desk. It is handled, he snapped. Why can you not just be happy for your sister? Why does everything have to be an inquisition with you? Because Madison thinks margins are something you write in a notebook. I said, Dad, look at me. He refused. He looked at the map on the wall. I am not asking as your daughter right now, I said, keeping my voice level. I am asking as someone who knows this business better than anyone. If you move the assets without notifying the primary lenders, you are in default. If the loan gets called, you do not have the liquidity to pay it. You will lose the building. He turned to me then, and his face was a mask of terrified exhaustion. It is part of a larger strategy, he said. We are positioning for growth. Growth? I asked. With who? That is when the door opened without a knock. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a navy suit that was tailored a little too tightly, and brown leather shoes that cost more than the forklift in the bay. He had the kind of face that was handsome in a generic, news anchor way, tanned skin, white teeth, and eyes that didn't smile when his mouth did. Ah, this must be the other daughter, he said. His voice was a rich baritone, smooth as polished teak. He walked over and extended a hand. I didn't stand up. And you are? I asked. Trent Bramwell, he said, not retracting his hand. Bramwell Advisory Group. Your father has retained us to help modernize the firm. I looked at his hand until he finally dropped it to his side. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked amused. He pulled up a chair and sat next to me, dragging it slightly so he was sitting at the head of the invisible table, triangulating himself between me and my father. Robert, he said, nodding at my father. We were just discussing the Q3 projections. Sarah has questions, Robert said weakly. I am sure she does. Trent said. He turned to me, clasping his hands on his knee. It is always hard when family dynamics intersect with business evolution. Change is emotional. I am not emotional. I said, I am operational. And I want to know why my name was removed from the authorized signer list on the escrow accounts without my consent. Trent smiled. It was a patronizing, pitying expression. We are simplifying the ownership structure. Sarah. Can I call you Sarah? You can call me Ms. Foster. Ms. Foster, he corrected, without missing a beat. Complexity is the enemy of agility. Having multiple signatories, especially ones who are absentee, creates bottlenecks. We needed to streamline the decision-making process to allow Madison the freedom to pivot. Pivot to what? I asked. To a more holistic market position, Trent said. He used the buzzwords like weapons, synergy, vertical integration, brand equity. It was a lot of noise that meant absolutely nothing. I looked at my father. Dad, this is a marine supply company. We sell anchors, chains, and diesel filters. There is no holistic market position. There is inventory turnover and cash flow. That is a very traditional view. Trent said, and understandable. Given that you have been away, you are looking at the company as it was, not as it could be. Your father and Madison share a vision for the future. I stood up. I had heard enough. I want to see the financials. I said, current balance sheet, PL for the last 6 months, and the accounts payable aging report. Trent chuckled softly. I am afraid that is confidential company data. Ms. Foster, as you are no longer an employee or an owner, we cannot share that with you. Privacy laws. You understand. I felt the blood hammering in my ears. I looked at my father. Dad? You are going to let him tell me I cannot see the books? I built those books. Robert looked at Trent, then at me. He looked like a trapped animal. Trent is right. Sarah, you do not have the clearance anymore. I stared at him, the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who cried when I got into grad school. He was gone, replaced by this husk of a man who was letting a stranger in a tight suit dictate terms to his own blood. Fine, I said. I walked out of the office. I didn't slam the door. I closed it with a soft, definitive click. I walked down the hall to the break room. It was empty. I needed to think. I needed to get my hands on data. Then I remembered. I had set up the company's email server 3 years ago. We used a cloud-based system. When I left for Boston, I had handed over the admin credentials to Nora, but I had kept a backdoor admin account for emergencies, a break glass in case of fire login that I had created because my father was notorious for forgetting passwords. I pulled out my phone. I disconnected from the company Wi-Fi. I didn't want my traffic logged on the local router, and used my cellular data. I navigated to the admin portal. I typed in the username, admin_ghost. I typed in the password, Harborside, 1985. The loading circle spun. My heart hammered against my ribs. If they had hired a real IT firm, they would have scrubbed this account months ago. The screen flashed white. Then, the dashboard. Loaded. I was in. I didn't have time to read everything. I went straight to the archiving tool. I searched for Trent and Bramwell in my father's sent folder. Hundreds of results popped up. I scrolled back to the beginning. January, 6 months ago. There was an email from Robert to Trent. Subject, RE, options. I tapped it open. Trent, I understand the terms. I am just worried about the personal liability clause. If the valuation doesn't hold, does the house go into the collateral pool? Elaine is asking. We need to move fast. The winter was harder than we thought. Robert. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The house. They were leveraging the house. I scrolled forward. April. Subject. Transfer timeline. Trent. Sarah is graduating in May. We need to have the structure in place before she comes back. She will ask questions. She is sharp. If she sees the debt load, she will stop the deal. We need to accelerate the transfer to Madison. Madison will sign whatever we need. Please send the papers. I lowered the phone. The air in the break room felt suddenly thin. They hadn't just cut me out because they favored Madison. They had cut me out because I was the only one who would have stopped them from jumping off a cliff. They were hiding debt, and they were using Madison as the scapegoat to sign for it. The door to the break room swung open. Elaine walked in. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like she was incognito. She saw me and stopped. What are you doing here? She asked. I held up my phone, checking my email. I lied. You should not be here. Sarah, she said, her voice sharp. You are upsetting the staff. There is no staff. Mom, the receptionist desk is empty. She waved a hand dismissively. We are transitioning to a virtual front desk. Trent says it is more efficient. Trent says a lot of things. I said, I put my phone in my pocket. Mom, I just asked Dad for the financials. He refused. Good, she said. She walked over to the coffee machine and inspected it with distaste. You do not get to interrogate us. Sarah, you do not get to come waltzing back here after choosing your life in the city and demand to see our bank accounts. Choosing my life? I stepped closer to her. I went to the city to get the skills to save this place. You went to the city because you think you are too good for Harborside. She spat back. You always have. You look down on us. You look down on your sister. I do not look down on Madison. I said, I am terrified for her. Do you know what she signed? Mom? Do you know what personal guarantees are? She is the owner, Elaine shouted. It was a sudden, piercing shriek that made me flinch. She is the owner, and she is doing a wonderful job, and we are going to be rich. Sarah. Rich. Trent has a plan to sell the company to a conglomerate for 3 times its value. We are going to retire to Florida. We are going to be free of this drafty warehouse. She stopped. realizing she had said too much. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Sell?" I asked quietly. "You are selling the business?" "We are exploring options," she stammered. "Grandpa built this place." I said. "Your grandfather is dead," she hissed. "And we are tired. Sarah, we are so tired. You don't understand." She was right. I didn't understand. But I was starting to. I walked past her. "I am leaving." "Mom, but tell Trent I said hello." I drove out of the lot, my hands shaking on the wheel. I needed to talk to someone sane. I needed Nora. I met her in a diner in Falmouth, 2 towns over. It was a chrome and neon place that smelled of bacon grease. Nora Keene was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a cup of black coffee. She looked smaller than I remembered. She was 60, with gray hair cut in a sensible bob, and eyes that had seen 40 years of foster family drama. When I sat down, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Did you see him?" she asked. "Trent?" "Yes. He is a shark." "Sarah, a shark in a suit." "Nora," I said, leaning in. "I need to know exactly why you quit. I need the details." She looked around the diner, checking for eavesdroppers. "In February," she whispered, "your dad called me into his office. Trent was there. They had a stack of invoices from a vendor I did not know." "Apex Logistics," I frowned. "I have never heard of them." "Exactly. They wanted me to enter them into the system, $50,000 worth. But Sarah, they wanted me to backdate them to last year." "Backdate them? Why?" "To lower the net income for the previous tax year," Nora said, "or maybe to justify a loan disbursement. I do not know the strategy. I just know it is fraud. I told your father I wouldn't do it. What did he say?" "He cried." Nora said softly, "He actually cried. He said he was in a hole and he just needed to move some dirt around to get out. But Trent looked at me like I was a bug he wanted to squash. He told me that if I wasn't a team player, my pension might be complicated." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. "They threatened your pension?" "I resigned the next day," she said. "But before I left, I saw the bank statements." "What did you see?" "Withdrawals. Sarah, large ones, every Friday, labeled consulting retainer, Bramwell Group, $5,000 a week." $5,000 a week? That was 20 grand a month. The business didn't have that kind of margin. They were bleeding the company dry while they prepped it for slaughter. "Thank you." "Nora," I said. I pulled a notebook out of my bag. I started writing. Timeline. January. Dad emails Trent about liability. Desperation. February. Nora asked to backdate invoices. Fraud. February. Consulting payments start. $20,000 per month. April. Decision to transfer to Madison to avoid Sarah's scrutiny. May. Transfer executed. June. I come home. It was a classic bust-out scheme, or something close to it. Load the company with debt. Siphon off the cash through consulting fees. Sell the shell to a buyer who thinks they are getting a legacy brand, and leave the original owners, or in this case, the new owner, Madison, holding the bag when the fraud is discovered. But why would Trent want to sell? Usually, consultants just bleed the beast until it dies, unless the sale was the payout. If Trent was getting a commission on the sale price, he had every incentive to pump up the appearance of the company, hide the debt, and flip it fast. I looked at Nora. "Does Madison know any of this?" Nora shook her head. "Madison thinks she is the queen of the castle. She comes in, signs the papers Trent gives her, and goes to lunch. They are using her. Sarah, they are using her because she is suggestible." I finished. "And because they know you would have caught them." Nora said, "I paid for the coffee. I drove back to Harborside, but I didn't go home. I went to the town marina. I knew Madison would be there. She took a yoga class on the pier at noon on Tuesdays. I waited by her bright yellow Jeep Wrangler at 12:30. She walked up, carrying a rolled-up mat and looking flushed and happy. When she saw me leaning against her car, her smile faltered. "Sarah, are you stalking me? We need to talk." "Madison, I am not talking about the business, she said, unlocking the car. Mom said you are trying to sabotage me. I am trying to save you from going to federal prison. I said. That stopped her. She froze with her hand on the door handle. What? I stepped closer. I know about the backdated invoices. Madison. I know about the $20,000 a month going to Trent. I know Dad is terrified of losing the house. Madison's face crumbled. The mask of the boss babe dissolved, revealing the scared little sister underneath. I do not know about invoices. She whispered. You are the managing partner. I said. You are the legal owner. If those invoices are fraudulent, you are the one who goes to jail, not Dad, not Trent. You. She started to cry. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was ugly. Gasping sobs. I didn't want it, she choked out. I didn't want any of it. Dad made me. He said it was urgent. He said if I didn't sign, the family would lose everything. He said you were too busy to help. I grabbed her shoulders. Madison, look at me. What did you sign? Everything, she sobbed. Loan papers, vendor contracts, I don't know. Trent just put sticky notes where I need to sign. Okay, I said, softening my voice. Okay. We can fix this, but you have to trust me. I cannot, she said, shaking her head. Mom made me promise. She said you would try to destroy them. She said you would try to take the money. There is no money. Madison, I hissed. That is the point. They are stealing the money. She looked at me, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. She was searching my face for the truth. I need to see the papers. I said, you have the keys to the office. You have the right to see everything. Tonight, after they go to sleep, we are going to go to the office. Just you and me. I cannot go to the office at night, she said. The alarm code. You are the owner. I said, you have the code. She sniffled. It is Mom's birthday. The code is Mom's birthday. Of course it was. Okay, she said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. But you have to promise. Promise what? Promise you won't destroy Mom. She just wants to be happy. She wants to move to Florida. I felt a pang of pity so deep it hurt. Elaine had brainwashed her own daughter into being a human shield. I promise I won't destroy Mom. I lied. I just want to see the truth. Okay. I watched her drive away. I felt heavy. I was carrying the weight of the entire family now. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the public library, researching the Bramwell Advisory Group. Their website was a masterpiece of stock photos and vague corporate jargon. No physical address listed. Just a P.O. box in Delaware. No list of partners. Just Trent. It was a ghost ship. I drove back to the house at 5. The atmosphere was frigid. Elaine wouldn't look at me. Robert was locked in the den. I went straight to my room and waited. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the house to go quiet. The silence of the suburbs was oppressive. It was a silence that hid things. At 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I rolled over and picked it up. It was a text message. From an unknown number, I opened it. Stop digging. You'll cost everyone everything. I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to glow with a malevolent light. My heart hammered against my ribs. Stop digging. Was it Trent? It had to be. But how did he know? Had Madison told him? Or was he watching my email access? I sat up, the room suddenly feeling very cold and very small. You'll cost everyone everything. It wasn't just a threat. It was a prediction. I typed a reply. My thumbs shaking. Who is this? I hit send. The message failed to deliver. The number had already been disconnected. I put the phone down. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. A dark sedan was parked 2 houses down, under the street lamp. As I watched, its headlights flicked on, and it pulled away slowly, disappearing into the fog. I wasn't just fighting for a company anymore. I was fighting something much darker. I grabbed my car keys. I wasn't going to wait for Madison. I was going to the office now. If they wanted to threaten me, they should have known better. Threats didn't make me stop. They made me focus. I slipped out of the house. The guest, in my own life, stepping into the night to find the weapon that would save us all: the ledger. The fluorescent lights of my office in Boston hummed with a frequency that seemed designed to induce migraines. I sat at my desk, staring at a supply chain optimization model for a pharmaceutical client. But the numbers on the screen kept blurring into the shape of a coastline. It had been 3 days since I returned from Harborside. 3 days of pretending to be a functional operations manager while my mind was stuck in a gray-shingled house 60 miles south. Dissecting a betrayal that felt like a physical wound. I could not focus. My boss, a man named David who measured his life in quarterly KPIs, had stopped by my desk twice to ask if I was settling back in. I had smiled, that tight, corporate smile that says everything is fine, and told him I was just decompressing from graduation. The truth was, I was hunting. I had closed the company spreadsheets and opened a blank Excel workbook. I named it Project Anchor. If my family would not give me the data, I would reconstruct it from the outside in. I started with public records. I pulled the Uniform Commercial Code filings from the Massachusetts Secretary of the Commonwealth's database. I looked up property tax assessments for the warehouse and the family home. I scoured industry forums for pricing trends on marine diesel and cordage. What I found was a silhouette of a disaster. There was a UCC, one financing statement filed 4 months ago against Foster Marine Supply. The secured party was not First Harbor Bank, our traditional lender. It was a company called Liberty Capital Solutions, based in New Jersey. A quick search of their name brought up forums filled with words like predatory, hard money, and last resort. I typed the numbers into my model. If Dad had gone to a hard money lender, the interest rates were likely between 12 and 18%. That was death for a low-margin distribution business. The only reason to take money that expensive was if the traditional banks had already said no. I needed professional eyes on this. I left the office at 5 o'clock and took the T to a coffee shop in Kendall Square. I was meeting Priya Wexler. Priya was a friend from my undergraduate days who had gone into corporate law, then pivoted to small business litigation because, as she put it, she liked the fights better. She was already there, typing furiously on a laptop, a half-eaten scone on the plate beside her. She looked up as I approached, her dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You look like hell." "Sarah," she said by way of greeting. "Good to see you too." "Priya." I sat down and slid a manila folder across the table. It contained the printouts of the UCC filings, the org chart I had photographed, and my reconstructed PL statement. "Tell me I am paranoid," I said. Priya opened the folder. She read in silence for 10 minutes. She did not sip her coffee. She did not blink often. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. "You are not paranoid," she said. "You are watching a car crash in slow motion." "Walk me through it," I said. Priya tapped the UCC filing with a manicured fingernail. "This lender, Liberty Capital? They are sharks. They lend against assets, not cash flow. They do not care if you can make the monthly payments. In fact, they prefer if you cannot. If you default, they seize the collateral, in this case, the inventory and the accounts receivable." "And the consultant?" I asked. "The Bramwell Group." Priya sighed. She leaned back in her chair. "That is the classic 1-2 punch. Sarah, a business gets into cash flow trouble. Maybe a bad season. Maybe a lost contract. The owner panics. He cannot get a bank loan because his ratios are off. Enter the turnaround consultant. He promises to restructure the debt, modernize the operations, and find capital. He brings in a lender like Liberty, and then the consultant bleeds the company with retainer fees. Priya said, "He installs himself or his proxy in the decision-making chain. He isolates the owner from anyone who might ask questions, like, say, a daughter with an MBA." I felt a cold shiver. That is exactly what happened. "There is more," Priya said. She flipped to the org chart. "Why transfer ownership to your sister? Why now?" "They said it was for succession." I said, "Bull." Priya said, "If your father personally guaranteed that loan, and I guarantee you he did, Transferring the business to a new owner might trigger a default clause unless the lender approved it. Or what? Or the lender and the consultant are working together, Priya said. If the goal is a forced sale, it is often easier to manipulate an inexperienced owner, your sister. If Trent Bramwell wants to sell the company to strip the assets, he needs a rubber stamp. Your father might have hesitated. He has an emotional attachment to the legacy. Your sister? If they tell her it is the only way to save Mom and Dad, she will sign the deed. I rubbed my temples. My head was throbbing. So the exit strategy isn't to save the business. I said, it is to sell it. Likely, Priya said. And if this Trent guy has a standard engagement letter, he probably has a success fee clause. If the company sells, he gets a percentage of the gross sale price. He has every incentive to push for a sale, even if it leaves your family with nothing but tax bills and paid-off debt. What do I do? I asked. Can I sue? Priya shook her head. Not yet. You have no standing. You are not an owner. You are not an employee. You are just a concerned relative. If you sue now, they will paint you as the disgruntled heir cut out of the will. You need evidence of fraud. Sarah, real evidence, not just bad business decisions. Being stupid isn't illegal. I need the documents. I said, the loan agreement and Trent's contract. Get them. Priya said, and Sarah? Yeah? Do not let them know you are building a case. If this guy realizes you are a threat, he will accelerate the timeline. He will burn the house down to get the insurance money. I took the train back to Harborside that Friday. I didn't go to the house. I texted Madison. Meet me at the library in Pembroke, the one on Center Street. Go to the history section in the basement. 2 p.m. Don't tell Mom. She didn't reply for an hour. Then, a single thumbs-up emoji. The Pembroke Public Library was a brick fortress of silence. The basement smelled of old paper and damp carpet. I sat at a wooden table tucked behind a row of shelves, holding bound volumes of town records. It was the kind of place where secrets felt at home. Madison arrived 10 minutes late. She was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, looking over her shoulder like she was in a spy movie. When she saw me, she hurried over and sat down, dropping her oversized purse on the table with a heavy thud. You are acting weird, she whispered. Why couldn't we meet at Starbucks? Because Starbucks has windows. Madison, and Trent probably has your phone tracked. She pulled her phone out and stared at it in horror. Can he do that? If you installed company email on it? Yes. She shoved the phone deep into her bag. She looked pale. Her makeup was smudge-free, but her eyes were tired. Did you bring them? I asked. She nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of glossy 4x6 photographs. I couldn't get the copier to work without a code. She hissed, so I just took pictures of the papers on Dad's desk while he was at lunch. Good, I said. I spread the photos out on the table. They were blurry, taken in haste, but legible. I arranged them like a mosaic. The first was the loan agreement with Liberty Capital Solutions. I scanned the terms. Interest rate? 14%. Default rate? 24%. Collateral? All inventory, equipment, accounts, and real property located at 14 Dockside Lane. They had mortgaged the building, the warehouse that Grandpa Thomas had bought with cash in 1970. I looked at the next photo. It was the engagement letter with Bramwell Advisory Group. I read the fee structure, monthly retainer, $20,000, and then, there it was, paragraph 6, subsection B, transaction fee, upon the sale, merger, or divestiture of the company. Advisor shall receive a success fee equal to 5% of the total transaction value, or $200,000, whichever is greater, and right below it, a timeline clause. If a transaction is executed within 12 months of the effective date, the advisor shall receive an additional bonus of $50,000. I looked up at Madison. She was chewing her lip, watching me read. What does it mean? She asked. It means he is paid to sell us. I said, he gets a bonus if he sells the company within a year. That is why he is rushing everything. That is why he wanted you in charge. Why me? Because Dad might have fought for the legacy. I said, but you? You are scared. You just want the pain to stop. Trent knows that. He is going to bring you a buyer. Tell you it is the only way to pay off this 14% loan. And you are going to sign. Madison looked down at the photos. He introduced me to a man yesterday. She said quietly. Who? His name is Simon Cross. Trent said he represents a logistics group from New York. He looked at the warehouse. He measured the loading docks. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was already happening. Did you sign anything with him? I asked urgently. No, not yet. Trent said we are having a strategic planning session next week. Okay. I said, listen to me. Do not sign anything. If Trent puts a paper in front of you, you spill your coffee on it, you faint, you run out of the room, do not sign. I am scared. Sarah, she whispered. Mom keeps saying we are going to be rich. She is looking at condos in Sarasota. She says I am the golden goose. You are not the golden goose. Madison, you are the turkey on Thanksgiving. They are fattening you up to serve you on a platter. She started to cry, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. I picked up the photos. I need to keep these. Take them, she said. I do not want to see them. I drove to the house. The fog had lifted, replaced by a harsh, bright sunlight that made the peeling paint on the neighbors' fences look stark and sad. I found my father in the garage. He was standing at his workbench, sanding a piece of mahogany. Sawdust covered his hands and his flannel shirt. He wasn't working on a boat part. He was making a birdhouse. I stood in the doorway, watching him. He looked small. The powerful, boisterous man who had taught me to drive a forklift was gone. In his place was a man hiding in the dust of his own making. Dad? He stopped sanding. He didn't turn around. Sarah, your mother is inside. I am not here for Mom. I said. I walked into the garage. The smell of sawdust and varnish was comforting. It smelled like the truth. I know about the Liberty loan. Dad. His shoulders stiffened. He picked up a rag and started wiping the wood. A nervous, repetitive motion. You do not understand the pressure, he said, his voice low. 14% interest. I said gently, Dad, that is not a loan. That is a noose. I had a bad year, he shouted suddenly, slamming the rag down. He turned to face me. His eyes were wet. We lost the contract with the marina chain. The winter was brutal. We had no cash. I couldn't make payroll. What was I supposed to do? Tell the guys to go home? Tell your mother we couldn't afford the club dues? You should have called me. I said, you were busy. You were becoming a star in Boston. I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want you to know I was failing. So you hired Trent. I said, he said he could fix it. Robert whispered, he said he had relationships. He brought the money when the bank said no. And now he is pushing for a sale. I said, he says it is the best market conditions, Robert said, repeating the line like a catechism. He says we can cash out and be free. Dad, I stepped closer. There is no cash out, after you pay Liberty, and Trent's fees, and the capital gains tax. There will be nothing left. You will lose the warehouse. You will lose the income. You will lose the legacy. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the fog lift from his eyes. I saw the terrifying clarity of a man realizing he had been conned. I signed the personal guarantee, he whispered. If we do not sell, they take the house. We can fight it. I said, we can restructure, but we have to get Trent out. We have to stop the sale. He shook his head. It is too late. The papers. It is not too late. I insisted. Madison hasn't signed the sale agreement yet. Suddenly, the door from the kitchen flew open. Elaine stood there. She was holding a glass of white wine. Her face flushed. What are you doing? She demanded. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the sawdust air. I am talking to Dad. I said, you are harassing him, she yelled. She marched down the steps, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. Look at him. Sarah, he is shaking. Why do you always have to come here and stir up trouble? I am trying to save his house. Mom, I said, my voice rising, do you know he leveraged the house? Of course I know, she snapped. It is a bridge loan. Trent explained it perfectly. We use the equity to bridge the gap until the acquisition. It is standard business. Sarah, not that you would know, you are just an operations manager. Trent is a visionary. A visionary? I laughed. A bitter sound. He is a con artist. Mom, he is playing to your vanity. How dare you? She hissed. She stepped between me and my father, shielding him like a lioness protecting a cub, or a jailer protecting a prisoner. You are jealous. You have always been jealous. You cannot stand that Madison is the one who is going to make us rich. You want to be the hero. I do not want to be the hero, I shouted. I want us not to be homeless. Get out, Elaine said. She pointed a trembling finger at the driveway. Get out of my house. You are poison. Sarah, you are negative and bitter, and you are trying to ruin the best thing that has happened to us in years. I looked at my father over her shoulder. Dad? He looked down at his birdhouse. He picked up the sandpaper. He started sanding again. Scritch. 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 He wasn't going to save me. He was too broken to even save himself. I turned and walked out. The role of the scapegoat felt heavy on my shoulders. Like a wet wool coat, I was the problem. I was the negative one. I was the one who saw the cliff they were driving toward, and for that, I had to be exiled. I went to my car, but I didn't leave. I sat in the driveway for a long time, breathing through my nose, fighting the urge to scream until my throat bled. I remembered the envelope. I reached into my glove compartment where I had stashed it. I pulled it out. Sarah, do not open. I tore it open. This time, I didn't care about the seal. I pulled out a single sheet of yellowed legal pad paper. My grandfather's handwriting was jagged, written in the last months of his life when his Parkinson's was bad. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, I am gone, and things have likely become complicated. I have left the business to your father because it is the way things are done, but I worry. Robert has a good heart, but he has no stomach for a fight. And he listens to your mother too much. Elaine has expensive tastes and a short memory for where the money comes from. I am not leaving you shares, because I know that would tear the family apart before you are ready. But know this, you are the one with the salt in your blood. You are the one who understands that a business is a promise, not a piggy bank. If the day comes when the promise is broken, do not look for permission to fix it. Just fix it. Fairness is not about everyone getting the same thing. Fairness is about everyone getting what they earned. Love, Grandpa. I sat there, tears hot on my face. He had known, 10 years ago. He had seen exactly where this road would end. Do not look for permission. I wiped my face. I put the letter away. I pulled out my phone and dialed Priya. She answered on the first ring. I have the documents, I said. My voice was steady. And it is worse than we thought. Personal guarantees, success fees, a timeline that expires in 2 weeks. Okay, Priya said. Do you want me to draft a cease and desist? No, I said. A cease and desist will just make them go underground. It will make Trent rush the signing. I need to stop this in public. I need to blow it up where they cannot hide. What do you have in mind? The annual vendor open house is next Saturday. I said, every supplier, every local politician, and every major customer will be there. Trent is planning to use it to announce the strategic partnership with the buyer, and you are going to crash the party? I am not going to crash it, I said. I am going to attend. I am a member of the family, and I am going to ask some questions during the QA. Sarah, Priya warned, if you do this, there is no going back. You will humiliate your parents in front of the whole town. They are already humiliated. I said, they just do not know it yet. I would rather they be embarrassed and housed than proud and destitute. I need you there, Priya. I need you to bring the legal weight. I will be there, she said. Wear a suit. I hung up. I looked at the house one last time. Elaine was in the kitchen window, watching me. I didn't wave. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I drove back to Boston, but my mind was already moving pieces on a chessboard. I needed to call the vendors. I needed to talk to the warehouse guys. I needed to assemble a packet of truth so dense that no amount of consultant spin could penetrate it. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the opposition research, and I was going to be thorough. I treated the next 3 days like a forensic audit. Operating from a makeshift command center at my dining room table in Boston, my weapon of choice was not a lawyer or a subpoena, but a telephone and 10 years of relationships. I started with the vendors who had known my grandfather. These were men and women who didn't care about corporate titles or org charts. They cared about who paid the bills on time and who sent a fruit basket at Christmas. I called Jimmy Vane, the regional manager for Sampson Cordage. Jimmy had taught me how to splice a double-braided dock line when I was 12. "Sarah," he boomed when he picked up, "I heard you graduated. We were expecting a party invite. But then we heard about the transition. Transition. That was the word Trent must have used. That is actually why I'm calling." "Jimmy," I said, keeping my voice light and professional, "I am just doing a little due diligence on the handover to ensure nothing slips through the cracks. I noticed some chatter about new routing instructions for the July payments. Did that come through to you?" There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that meant someone was shifting in their chair. "Yeah, we got it," Jimmy said, his voice dropping an octave. "To be honest, Sarah, it was a little weird. We have been wiring to the First Harbor operating account for 30 years. Suddenly we get a memo from this Bramwell guy saying to route all payments under $10,000 to a management holding account at a bank in Delaware. He said it was for tax efficiency." My pen froze over my legal pad. "Tax efficiency," I repeated. "Did he ask you to sign a new vendor terms agreement?" "He did." Jimmy said, "And Sarah? It pushed our payment terms from net 30 to net 60, but asked for a 5% discount for early payment. It felt tight, like they were trying to pull cash forward. I called your dad, but he wouldn't come to the phone. Trent told me Robert was retired from day-to-day ops. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. Robert was sitting in his garage making birdhouses. Not retired. Hiding. "Listen, Jimmy," I said, "do not switch the routing yet. Tell them your compliance department needs a wet signature from the majority owner. Tell them you need Madison to sign it in front of a notary." "Madison?" Jimmy sounded skeptical. "Sarah, no offense to your sister, but the last time I saw her, she asked me if our anchor chains came in rose gold. Is she really running the show?" "She is learning," I said, protecting her instinctively despite everything. "Just hold off on the new terms." Jimmy, for me, I made 5 more calls. The pattern was identical. The fuel supplier had been asked to backdate a delivery receipt. The electronics distributor had been pressured to increase their credit limit. And everywhere, Trent Bramwell was the gatekeeper, smoothing over the irregularities with buzzwords and hints that the old management, meaning my father and me, had left things in a mess that he was heroically cleaning up. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. I wasn't just out. I was being erased. On Wednesday, I drove down to Harborside. I didn't go to the house. I parked in the lot of the Whole Foods where Madison liked to buy her overpriced smoothies. I knew her schedule. She was a creature of comfort, and stress made her predictable. I found her in the cafe section, staring at a green juice like it was a crystal ball. She looked terrible. Her skin was pale, and she was picking at her cuticles until they were raw. I sat down opposite her. She jumped, spilling a little green sludge on the table. "Sarah, you cannot just sneak up on me. I am not sneaking. Madison, I am worried." She slumped in her chair. "I am so tired. Sarah, Trent calls me at 7 every morning. He talks so fast. He uses words I have to Google under the table. EBITDA, liquidity events, mezzanine financing." I just nod. I just keep nodding because if I stop, he looks at me with this disappointment, like I am letting the family down. "You are not letting anyone down," I said gently. "You are being bullied." "He scheduled a meeting for Friday," she said, lowering her voice. "He calls it a strategic planning session. He invited a man named Simon Cross. Trent says he is a consultant who specializes in logistics synergies." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Synergies. That was code for a buyout. "Madison, Simon Cross isn't a consultant," I said, I looked him up after you mentioned him last time. He is a vice president of acquisitions for Northeast Marine Holdings. They are a roll-up firm. They buy independent supply houses, fire the staff, sell the real estate, and move the inventory to a central hub in New Jersey. Madison's eyes widened. Fire the staff? But Nora's nephew works in the warehouse, old Mr. Henderson is the night watchman. Dad promised them they would always have jobs. Dad isn't making the promises anymore. I said, Trent is, and Trent gets a $200,000 check if he sells the company to Simon Cross. She put her head in her hands. I want to quit. Sarah, I just want to go back to the yoga studio. I hate the smell of diesel. I hate the way the vendors look at me. Then quit. I said, I cannot, she whispered furiously. Mom says if I quit, the bank takes the house. She says I am the only thing standing between Dad and a heart attack. She says... She stopped. She says what? She says you are jealous, Madison said quietly. She says you want to see us fail so you can swoop in and say, I told you so. She says you do not love us. You just love being right. The words landed like darts. They were precise, tailored specifically to pierce my armor. Is that what you think? I asked. Madison looked up. Her eyes were wet. I do not know. Sarah, you are always so perfect. You always have the answer. It is hard to be your sister sometimes. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her palm was cold and clammy. I am not perfect. Madison, I am terrified. I am living in a studio apartment in Boston eating ramen because I put every cent I had into tuition. I am not trying to be right. I am trying to stop a predator from eating our family. She squeezed my hand back, weakly, but it was there. What do we do? She asked. We have to talk to them, I said, together, one last time, before the meeting with Simon Cross. We have to offer them a way out that doesn't involve selling the soul of the company. They won't listen. They have to. I said, because I found something else. I hadn't told her yet. I hadn't told anyone. But late last night, staring at the reconstructed ledger I had built from the scraps of data, I had found an anomaly. It was a recurring payment from 3 years ago. Small amounts, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, coded in the old system, the paper system my father used, as marketing expenses. But there were no invoices. I had cross-referenced the check numbers with the bank scans I had saved on my old backup drive. The checks weren't written to a marketing firm. They were written to LM Designs. I knew that name. Linda Miller, my mother's best friend from college. Linda had tried to start a boutique clothing line 5 years ago. It had failed spectacularly. Elaine had bailed her out. With company money, it totaled nearly $60,000. That was why the accounts were always tight. That was why Elaine was so viciously protective of the books. It wasn't just that she didn't understand the math. It was that she feared what the math would reveal. She had embezzled from the family business to save face for a friend, and she had never paid it back. I cannot tell you yet. I said to Madison, but I have a lever. We met at the house that evening. I had asked Madison to get them both in the living room. When I walked in, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. Elaine was sitting on the floral sofa, arms crossed, staring at the empty fireplace. Robert was standing by the window, looking out at the dark lawn. This is an ambush. Elaine said the moment I entered, it is a family meeting. I said, I sat in the armchair, the one that used to be Grandpa's. Madison sat next to me on the ottoman, her knees pulled up to her chest. I have a proposal, I said, keeping my voice steady. A way out. We have a way out. Elaine snapped. It is called Trent. Trent is selling the company. Mom, I said, he is selling it to a liquidation firm. They will fire the staff and sell the building. That is business. Elaine said, things change. We need the liquidity. You do not need liquidity. I said, you need management. I pulled a folder from my bag. Here is the plan. I said, we pause the sale discussions for 90 days. We fire Trent Bramwell immediately. I step in as interim general manager. Unpaid. I restructure the debt with a local credit union. I have already made some preliminary calls. And with the real estate equity, we can get a bridge loan at 6%, not 14. We bring in an independent auditor to clean up the books. We stabilize the cash flow, and in 2 years, if you still want to sell, we sell a healthy, profitable business for twice what Simon Cross is offering. Robert turned from the window. He looked at me, and for a flickering second, I saw hope. 6% interest, a way to save face. An audit? Elaine asked. Her voice was sharp, high and thin. Yes, I said. To clear the decks, we need to know exactly where the money went in the last 5 years so we can plan for the future. No, she said. Mom, it is the only way, Madison said, speaking up for the first time. Her voice trembled. I cannot run it. Mom, I do not know what I am doing. You are doing fine, Elaine shouted. She stood up, her face flushing pink. You are just letting her get inside your head. Look at her! She pointed a finger at me. She comes in here with her folders and her plans. She doesn't care about us. She cares about control. She wants to be the boss. She wants to prove that she is the smart one and we are the idiots. I do not think you are idiots, I said. You think we are children, Elaine cried. You think you can just march in here and audit us? Who are you? You are nobody. You are a single woman in her 30s with no husband and a degree that hasn't earned us a dime. You should be grateful we even let you in this house. Elaine, Robert said softly, that is enough. It is not enough. She turned on him. She is trying to destroy the sale. Robert, if she stops the sale, the loan comes due. If the loan comes due, we lose the house. Do you want to lose this house? Do you want to live in a condo in Revere? Robert flinched. The fear in his eyes was absolute. He looked at me, and then he looked at Elaine. He looked at the comfort of his living room, the illusion of his success. Sarah, he said, his voice raspy. Maybe it is best if you let Trent handle it. Dad, I said, feeling my heart break. He is robbing you. He is getting us out, Robert said. He turned back to the window. Please, just leave it alone. I looked at Elaine. She was triumphant. She had played the fear card, and she had won. But I knew why she was really terrified. It wasn't the house. It was the audit. If I brought in an accountant, the payments to LM, designs would come out. The $60,000 she had stolen would be exposed. She would lose her moral high ground. She would be revealed not as the protective matriarch, but as a thief. I stood up. I know about Linda Miller. Mom, I said quietly. The room went dead silent. Elaine went perfectly still. Her eyes widened, the pupils contracting to pinpricks. I know about the checks to LM, designs, I continued. I know you paid off her bankruptcy debt with company funds. $60,000. Robert turned around slowly. What? Elaine's face twisted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hatred. Pure, distilled hatred. You dug through my personal files? She hissed. I looked at the company ledger. I said, it wasn't personal. You made it business when you used the operating account. You little... Elaine stepped forward, raising her hand as if to slap me. Madison jumped up. Mom! Stop! Elaine froze. She lowered her hand, trembling. You are evil, she whispered to me. You are a cold, heartless thing. You would destroy your own mother for a spreadsheet. I am trying to stop you from destroying this family for a lie. I said, Get out, Robert said. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at Elaine. He was looking at me. His face was gray. Dad? Get out! Sarah, he said, his voice shaking with a mix of shame and rage. You come here. You dig up dirt. You throw accusations. You are tearing us apart. But Dad? She stole. I said, get out, he roared. I grabbed my bag. I looked at Madison. She was sobbing silently, standing between us like a ghost. I will see you at the open house. I said, I am uninviting you. Elaine spat. You cannot uninvite me. I said, it is a public event, and I am a shareholder. "You are not a shareholder," Elaine screamed. "We gave it all to Madison." I didn't answer. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the car. I sat in the driver's seat, gasping for air. It was done. The bridge was burned. I had pushed for the truth, and they had chosen the lie. They would rather be robbed by a stranger than saved by their daughter. Because the stranger flattered them and the daughter held up a mirror. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Heard you are asking questions about payment routing. Watch your back. People in this town talk. They say the older foster girl is off her meds. Unstable. Bitter." I stared at the screen. Trent. He wasn't just threatening me now. He was poisoning the well. He was telling the vendors, the bankers, the neighbors that I was crazy, unstable. It was the perfect cover. If I spoke up, he could dismiss it as the ramblings of a jealous, mentally ill daughter. I deleted the text. I didn't go back to Boston. I drove to a motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. I needed to be close. I opened my laptop. I had lost the family. I accepted that, but I wouldn't lose the war. I went to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website. I clicked on Corporations Division. I clicked File New Entity. Name: Foster Logistics Consulting, LLC. I filled in the details. Registered agent, Sarah Foster. Address, my apartment in Boston. I paid the $275 fee. The confirmation screen popped up. Filing successful. If they wanted to cast me out, fine. I would build my own boat. I would launch a consulting firm that did exactly what Foster Marine Supply used to do. But better, I would take the clients who valued competence over cronyism. But first, I had one last job to do. I opened a new document. I began to type. Vendor open house. Question list. 1. Can the current management explain the 15% surcharge on the new priority shipping tier? 2. Why has the payment routing for major accounts been moved to a holding company in Delaware? 3. What is the relationship between Bramwell Advisory and the potential buyer? Northeast Marine Holdings? 4. Does the proposed sale agreement include a provision for retaining the current warehouse staff? I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to be the most dangerous thing in the world. A calm woman with a microphone and a stack of facts. I printed the pages. Then I called Priya. "Are you ready?" I asked. "I have the draft complaint ready to file if they try to throw you out." Priya said. "And Sarah?" "Yeah?" "I found something on Trent. He was sued in Florida 3 years ago. Similar scheme. A family hardware chain. They settled out of court. But the allegations are identical. Breach of fiduciary duty. Fraudulent inducement. Send it to me." I said, "I am sending it now. Good luck. Sarah." I hung up. I lay back on the lumpy motel pillow and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. I felt a strange, cold peace. They called me unstable. They called me ungrateful. On Saturday, they were going to call me something else. They were going to call me right. The parking lot of Foster Marine Supply had not looked this full since the bicentennial parade. Cars lined the asphalt. Spilling onto the grass verges, a massive banner was strung between 2 forklifts parked at the entrance to the main bay, reading "Celebrating 50 years of service. The Foster legacy continues." I parked my Honda at the far end of the lot, next to a rusted dumpster. It felt appropriate. I turned off the ignition and looked at Priya Wexler in the passenger seat. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had been cut from a shark's skin. She held a slim leather briefcase on her lap. "Are you ready?" she asked. I smoothed the skirt of my navy blue dress. I had bought it for my graduation ceremony, a ceremony my parents had barely acknowledged. Now I was wearing it to their funeral, not a physical one, but the funeral of their reputation. "I am ready," I said. "Remember," Priya said, checking her reflection in the visor mirror, "you are not the angry daughter. You are the concerned shareholder. You are the professional. If you get emotional, Trent wins. He will paint you as the hysteric. You have to be ice. I am ice," I said. We got out of the car. The air was thick with the smell of roasting pork and diesel fumes. A local catering company had set up a spit roast near the loading dock. It was a grotesque touch. A pig turning slowly over coals, its skin blistering, while the people who were about to be slaughtered financially stood around drinking cheap wine in plastic cups. We walked toward the open bay doors. The warehouse had been transformed. The racks of inventory, pallets of anchor chain, spools of nylon rope, crates of hydraulic fluid, had been pushed back to create a central event space. High-top tables were scattered around. A temporary stage had been erected near the foreman's office, draped in blue velvet. I scanned the room. There were probably 100 people there. I recognized most of them. Jimmy Vane from Sampson Cordage, the loan officer from First Harbor Bank, the town selectman. These were people who had known my grandfather. They were the ecosystem of the business, and in the center of it all, performing the role of her life, was Elaine. She was wearing a pastel blue suit with a pearl necklace. She was holding court near the buffet, laughing too loudly, touching people on the arm, projecting a manic warmth that made my skin crawl. She looked radiant, but I knew the signs. I saw the tightness around her eyes, the way her hand gripped her wine glass until the knuckles were white. She was terrified. Robert was standing near the stage, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. His face was gray. He was sweating. Despite the cool breeze coming off the water, he kept checking his watch, then looking at the door, then looking at his shoes, and Madison. My sister stood next to a display of vintage nautical charts, looking like a child who had lost her mother in a department store. She was wearing a stiff black dress that didn't fit her. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around the room. Every time someone approached her to offer congratulations, she flinched. I took a breath. I felt a profound sadness wash over me, but I boxed it up and shoved it deep down. There was no room for sadness, only strategy. Let us circulate. I said to Priya, quietly. We moved through the crowd. I nodded to people I knew. Hello? Sarah? Mr. Henderson, the old night watchman, waved a napkin at me. Good to see you. We heard you were working in the city now. Big time. I smiled. It was a tight, polite smile. Just visiting. Mr. Henderson, good to see you. I saw Trent Bramwell. He was near the stage, talking to a tall man in a bespoke pinstripe suit. That is him. I whispered to Priya. The one in the pinstripes. Simon Cross, the buyer. Priya adjusted her glasses. He looks like he is measuring the square footage with his eyes. Simon Cross wasn't drinking. He wasn't smiling. He was looking at the roof trusses, assessing the structural integrity. He was looking at the inventory racks, calculating the liquidation value. He was a vulture circling a dying animal. Trent saw me. He paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he reassembled it into something slick and welcoming. He whispered something to Simon, patted him on the back, and walked toward me. Sarah, he boomed, extending a hand. So glad you could make it. We were not sure if your schedule would allow it. I did not take his hand. I held my clutch purse with both hands in front of me. I wouldn't miss it. Trent, it is a big day. It is, he said, dropping his hand but keeping the smile. A celebration of the past and the future. I see you brought a friend. This is Priya Wexler. I said, she is a colleague. Trent nodded at Priya. Nice to meet you. Well, grab a drink. Enjoy the food. We are getting started in 10 minutes. He turned and walked away, his stride confident. He thought he had won. He thought I was just there to watch, to accept my defeat and eat the shrimp cocktail. 10 minutes later, the music, a playlist of generic classic rock, faded out. The feedback of a microphone squealed, making the crowd wince. Trent bounded onto the stage. He held the microphone like a rock star. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Foster Marine Supply. Applause, polite, scattered applause. We are here to honor 50 years of excellence. Trent said, 50 years of serving this community. But we are also here to look forward. The maritime industry is changing. It is becoming digital. It is becoming global. And under the new leadership of the Foster family, This company is ready to evolve. He gestured to the side of the stage. Please welcome your new managing partner, Madison Foster. Madison walked onto the stage. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. She tripped slightly on the cable but caught herself. The crowd clapped, but there was a murmur of confusion. They knew Madison. They knew she taught yoga. They didn't know her as a logistics expert. Madison took the mic. Her hand was shaking so badly the microphone rattled against her rings. "Hi," she squeaked. She cleared her throat. "Hi. Thank you all for coming. I am really excited to step up. My grandfather built this place, and Trent has shown us a vision for how to make it even bigger. So thank you." She handed the mic back to Trent like it was a live grenade and practically ran off the stage. Elaine beamed from the front row. Clapping furiously, Robert stared at the floor. Trent took center stage again. Short and sweet. That is the kind of efficiency we like. Now, before we get back to the food, I want to share a little about our strategic roadmap. We are exploring some exciting partnership opportunities that will allow Foster Marine to leverage economies of scale. I listened. It was a masterclass in corporate obfuscation. He used words like synergy, optimization, and strategic alignment to hide the reality. He was selling them out. He hinted at new capital infusion and expanding the footprint, which meant selling the building and firing the staff. I waited. Finally, he said the words I was waiting for. "We have a few minutes for questions before we cut the cake. Anyone?" The room was silent. People shuffled their feet. In New England, people didn't ask questions at parties. They drank their beer and went home to gossip. I stepped forward. I walked out of the shadow of a pallet rack and stood in the center aisle. "I have a question," I said. My voice was clear, projected from the diaphragm, the way I used to speak in boardrooms in Boston. Trent froze. He shielded his eyes against the stage lights to see me. Sarah, we usually keep this to vendor questions. But, go ahead. Make it quick. It is a vendor question," I said. I pulled a piece of paper from my purse. "Can you explain why the payment routing for our top 5 accounts was changed last week to a holding company in Delaware called Bramwell Management, LLC?" The room went dead silent. The hum of the refrigerator unit seemed to get louder. Trent laughed. A nervous, barking sound. "Well, that is just a back-office detail. Sarah, standard tax optimization, not really the place for—" "And why?" I interrupted, cutting him off with surgical precision. "Are the margins on the Q2 income statement down 14% despite stable demand? Is it because of the $20,000 monthly consulting fee being paid to your firm?" A gasp rippled through the room. Elaine spun around, her eyes blazing. "Sarah," she hissed, "sit down." I didn't look at her. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the vendors. And finally, I asked, "Why is the company paying 14% interest on a hard money loan from Liberty Capital when our traditional line of credit with First Harbor was at 5%? Trent's face turned a mottled shade of red. "This is inappropriate," he shouted. "Security!" There was no security. There was just Mr. Henderson, the 70-year-old night watchman, who looked from Trent to me and folded his arms. He wasn't moving. "I am asking because I am a Foster," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry to the back of the room, "and because this strategic partnership you are talking about looks a lot like a liquidation sale." "She is lying," Elaine shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "She is jealous. She is mentally unstable. Do not listen to her." Trent tried to regain control. "Folks, please, this is a family dispute. Sarah has been struggling since she came back. We are handling it privately." "I am not struggling," I said, "and I am not lying." I turned to the crowd. "Does anyone else here have questions about new terms? About being asked to backdate invoices?" For a second, nobody moved. Then, Jimmy Vane cleared his throat. He stood up near the buffet table. He was a big man, wearing a faded Red Sox cap. "Actually," Jimmy said, his voice deep and gravelly, "I got a memo last week. Asked me to sign a new agreement. Net 60 terms. And yeah, the routing number was different." I called Robert. but I couldn't get him on the phone. The room shifted. You could feel the energy change. It wasn't a party anymore. It was a tribunal. Another voice spoke up. A woman from the electronics supplier. "We were asked to increase the credit limit," she said, "by 50,000. We were told it was for a capital project, but I haven't seen any POs for equipment." Trent was sweating profusely now. "These are operational details," he insisted. "We are positioning for growth." I walked toward the front of the room. I motioned to Priya. Priya opened her briefcase. She pulled out 10 thick packets. They were stapled neatly. We handed them out. One to the First Harbor loan officer, one to Jimmy Vane, one to the town's selectman, one to Simon Cross. "What is this?" Trent demanded. "You cannot distribute confidential materials." "It is not confidential." I said, "It is a summary of the facts." I stood before the stage. I looked at Simon Cross. He was flipping through the packet. He stopped at the page with the photo of the success fee clause. "Mr. Cross," I said, "did you know that Mr. Bramwell gets a double commission if he closes this deal within 12 months? Simon Cross looked at Trent. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. "Trent," he said softly, "is that true?" Trent stammered. "That is standard industry practice. It aligns incentives." I turned to the stage, to Madison. She was standing there, trembling. Tears were running down her face. She looked at the packet in Simon Cross's hand. She looked at our parents. "Madison," I said gently, "you do not have to do this." Elaine grabbed Madison's arm. "Madison, tell them. Tell them your sister is crazy. Tell them we are doing this for the family." Madison looked at Elaine. She looked at the grip on her arm. Madison started. Her voice cracked. "Speak up," Elaine hissed. "I didn't know." Madison screamed. The scream tore through the warehouse. It silenced everything. I didn't know what I was signing. Madison sobbed. She pulled her arm away from Elaine. She stepped to the edge of the stage. She looked at the crowd, her face a mask of misery. "I do not know what EBITDA is. I do not know what a lien is." Trent just put papers in front of me and said, "Sign here, sign here, sign here." He said if I didn't sign, Dad would have a heart attack. "Madison!" Elaine shouted. "Shut up. No," Madison yelled back. "I am done. Mom, I am done being the puppet." She pointed at Trent. "He told me to lie to the vendors. He told me to say Dad was sick so nobody would call him." The crowd was murmuring now, a low, angry sound. Elaine looked around wildly. Her facade was cracking. The benevolent matriarch was gone. In her place was a desperate, cornered woman. She turned on me. She marched down the steps of the stage and got in my face. Her eyes were wild. "You did this," she spat. "You poison. You have always been poison. You couldn't stand that we picked her. You couldn't stand that we loved her more." The words hung in the air. We loved her more. She had said it, out loud, in front of everyone. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. "I know. Mom," I said softly. The cruelty of it seemed to shock even her. She stepped back, hand to her mouth. People were exchanging looks. The neighbors, the friends. They were seeing the rot beneath the floorboards. Elaine turned to Robert. "Robert, do something! Throw her out!" Robert was still standing by the stage. He looked at his wife. He looked at his weeping daughter on the stage. He looked at me, standing tall in my navy suit. He looked at Trent, who was furiously texting on his phone, probably trying to transfer funds before the freeze hit. Robert walked to the microphone. He took it from the stand. His hand was shaking, but he held it tight. "It is true," he said. His voice was a ghost of the voice that used to command this warehouse. "Robert," Elaine warned. "It is true," he repeated. Louder. "There is a loan. I took it." He looked out at the crowd. Tears tracked through the sweat on his face. I messed up. The winter was bad. We lost the contract with the marina chain. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to look like a failure. Trent said he could fix it. He said if we transferred the business to Madison, we could get a fresh start. He looked at me. I was scared. Sarah, I was so scared. And I let them blame you because you would have seen the truth. You would have seen that I broke it." He dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud. He put his face in his hands and wept. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a structure collapsing. The foster family image, the legacy, the pride, the perfection, was a pile of rubble. Priya stepped forward. She didn't use a microphone. She didn't need to. Her voice was the voice of the law. "We are calling for an immediate suspension of all negotiations with Northeast Marine Holdings," she stated. "We are freezing the accounts of Foster Marine Supply pending a forensic audit. Any further transfer of assets will be considered a fraudulent conveyance." She looked at Trent. "And Mr. Bramwell? I have a process server waiting by your car with a subpoena regarding your undisclosed conflicts of interest." Trent didn't say a word. He looked at Simon Cross, who was already walking toward the exit, shaking his head. The deal was dead. Trent shoved his phone in his pocket and practically ran for the side door. The event dissolved. It didn't end. It fell apart. Vendors started gathering their coats, muttering to each other. The catering staff looked around, unsure whether to keep serving the pork. I stood there, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, leaving me cold and hollow. Madison was sitting on the edge of the stage, her head on her knees, crying. Robert was hugging her, both of them broken. Elaine stood alone in the center of the room. The guests gave her a wide berth, flowing around her like water around a rock. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry. There was no apology in them, only a cold, hard realization that she had lost. I walked over to Priya. "You did good," she said quietly. I looked at my family, my father, the broken man, my sister, the traumatized pawn, my mother, the unrepentant narcissist. I didn't feel happy. Revenge doesn't feel like happiness. It feels like relief. It feels like putting down a heavy bag you have been carrying for miles. "Let us go," I said to Priya. We walked out of the warehouse, past the banner that said, "The Foster Legacy Continues." The sun was setting over the harbor, turning the water the color of a bruise. I got into my car. I didn't look back. The truth had detonated. Now came the fallout. The Monday morning after the open house. The warehouse felt less like a place of business and more like a crime scene after the police tape had been removed. The silence was heavy, pressurized. The phones were not ringing, which was the most terrifying sound in the logistics industry. I sat in the conference room, the same room where Trent had tried to sell our legacy for parts. Priya sat opposite me, her laptop open. "So," Priya said, looking at a grim email chain, "Northeast Marine Holdings has officially withdrawn their letter of intent. Simon Cross sent a one-line email saying the due diligence revealed incompatible risk profiles. Translation: we are toxic." I said, "Essentially." "And the vendors?" I looked at my own screen. "Jimmy Vane has put us on credit hold. We are cash on delivery until further notice. 3 other suppliers have followed suit. We have 48 hours of diesel fuel in the tanks before the delivery trucks stop running." The door opened. It was not a confident entrance. Trent Bramwell walked in. He was not wearing his jacket. His tie was loose. He looked like a man who had not slept, but he was trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him this far. "We need to talk about settlement," he said, not sitting down. "Settlement?" I asked. "You defamed me, Sarah, publicly. You damaged my professional reputation. I am prepared to file suit for tortious interference unless we come to an arrangement regarding my exit fee." I looked at Priya. She didn't even look up from her screen. "Mr. Bramwell," Priya said, her voice bored, "I just forwarded a packet to your legal counsel in Delaware. It contains the affidavit from your former assistant regarding the backdated invoices, and a copy of the undisclosed side letter regarding your success fee." Trent stiffened. "If you file a suit?" Priya continued, finally looking at him over her glasses, "We will countersue for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and civil conspiracy, and we will send the entire file to the district attorney. You have until noon to vacate the premises. If you are here at 12:01, The police will remove you for trespassing." Trent stood there for a long moment. He looked at me. There was no apology in his eyes, just the cold calculation of a gambler who knew when to fold. "Good luck with the debt," he sneered. He turned and walked out. We heard the front door slam a minute later. He was gone, but the mess he had made remained. I spent the next hour reviewing the cash flow. It was a disaster. The loan payments to Liberty Capital were due in 3 days. We didn't have the cash. "Sarah," I looked up. My father was standing in the doorway. He looked 10 years older than he had last week. His shirt was untucked. He held a mug of coffee with 2 hands, as if for warmth. "Dad," I said, "can you come to the office?" He asked. "Please." I followed him down the hallway. The photos of the company picnics on the wall seemed to mock us. We walked into the executive office. Elaine was there. She was sitting in the visitor chair, looking out the window at the harbor. She did not turn when we entered. Robert sat behind his desk. He looked at the paperwork scattered across the mahogany surface, the loan docs, the demand letters, the foreclosure warnings. "It is a mess." "Sarah," he said. His voice was trembling. "I do not know how to fix it. The numbers, they do not make sense to me anymore." I sat down. "We need to call Liberty Capital." I said, "We need to negotiate a forbearance. We need to liquidate the slow-moving inventory to raise cash for the vendors." Robert nodded eagerly. "Yes. Yes, that sounds right. You know how to do that. You know the inventory." He leaned forward, his eyes wet with a desperate hope. "You can fix this. Sarah, you have the degree. You have the smarts. You can step in and manage the turnaround." I looked at him. I looked at the hope in his eyes. It was a familiar look. It was the same look he gave me when I was 10 and fixed the VCR. It was the look of a parent who wanted their child to be useful, but not powerful. "And what happens after I fix it?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Robert asked. "I mean, once the debt is restructured and the vendors are paid and the business is safe, what happens? Do I go back to being the ungrateful daughter? Does Madison go back to being the owner?" Robert blinked. "Well, we would be a family again." Elaine turned from the window. "You should want to fix it," she said. Her voice was cold, sharp as a filleting knife. "It is your inheritance, too." "I do not have an inheritance, Mom," I said. "You gave it to Madison. We did what we had to do," Elaine snapped. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. She was not broken. She was angry. She was a narcissist who had been publicly embarrassed, and she was looking for a way to regain the high ground. "We were protecting the family." She said, "Your father was drowning. I made a command decision. You stole $60,000. "Mom," I said calmly. "I borrowed it," she shouted. "For Linda. She was going to lose her condo. What was I supposed to do? Let my best friend end up on the street? I am a loyal person. Sarah, unlike you." I stared at her. The delusion was absolute. In her mind, she was the hero of a tragedy, not the villain of a crime. "I did what a mother had to do," she said, lifting her chin. "And now you are holding it over our heads. You humiliated us in front of the whole town. I hope you are happy." "I am not happy," I said. "I am trying to keep the bank from taking the keys to this building on Friday." "Then do it," Elaine said. "Stop asking for credit and just do the work. That is what you are good at, isn't it?" The work. I felt a cold knot in my chest. There it was. The work. That was all I was to them. A draft horse, useful for pulling the cart out of the mud, but not fit to drive it. Robert cleared his throat. He looked nervous. We talked about it. "Sarah, we want to offer you a position." "A position?" I asked. "Director of Operations," Robert said. "You would report to the family board. We would give you a salary, a good salary." "And equity?" I asked. Elaine laughed. A short, sharp bark. "Equity? Sarah, you just got here. Madison is the owner. We cannot just take it away from her. It would crush her confidence." I looked at my father. "You want me to work for Madison? You want me to save the company so she can own it? She is the owner of record," Robert mumbled. "It is complicated to change it back." The taxes. It is not complicated. I said, it is a choice, and you are choosing her again. Even after she admitted she doesn't know what she is doing, even after she begged for help, we are offering you a job, Elaine said. You should be grateful we are giving you anything after what you did at the open house. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. I am not looking for a job. I said, I have a job in Boston. I came here to find the truth. Well, you found it, Elaine said. Now, are you going to help us, or are you going to walk away and let your father lose everything? She played the guilt card. It was her favorite card. It was battered and worn from years of use, but she slammed it on the table anyway. I will think about it, I said. I walked out of the office. I needed air. I needed to get away from the toxic gravity of that room. I found Madison in the break room. She was sitting at the round plastic table. Surrounded by 3 ring binders, she had the company operating manual open. Her eyes were red, but she was reading. Hey, I said. She looked up. She looked exhausted. I'm trying to understand the inventory codes, she said, her voice small. There are so many numbers. Why are you doing this? I asked, sitting down next to her. Because I have to, she said. She closed the binder. I am the owner, Sarah, legally, if I walk away now. The bankruptcy is on my credit. It is on my name. Trent set it up, so I am the fall guy. She wasn't wrong. I talked to Mom. She said, and? She wants me to stay. She says if I leave, I am weak. She says I have to prove I am not just the pretty one. Madison looked at me, her eyes searching my face. She offered you a job, didn't she? Director of Operations. I said, no equity. Madison let out a long, shaky breath. I told them to give you half. She said, what? I told them this morning. I said, give Sarah 50%. Let us be partners. And what did they say? Mom said no. She said you would take over. She said you would push them out. I laughed humorlessly. She is right. I would stop the embezzlement. I would stop the vanity projects. I would make it a real business. Madison looked down at her hands. I do not want to do this alone. Sarah, I am drowning, but I cannot quit. I am trapped. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw a spark of something new in her eyes. It wasn't defiance. It was resolve. I am going to hire an external accountant, she said. Today, I am going to give them full access. No more secrets. And I want you to advise me, not as an employee, as a consultant. A consultant? Yeah. You have your own life. I do not want you to come back here and be miserable, but I need help. I will pay you a real rate. I looked at her. She was growing up. It was messy, and it was late, but it was happening. I need to check something first. I said, I went back to the conference room where Priya was working. Priya, I said, do you have the copies of Grandpa Thomas's original trust documents? The ones from the archive? Yes, she said. Why? I remembered something in the letter he left me. If the day comes when the promise is broken, check the succession clause. I said, specifically regarding competence and fiduciary duty. Priya typed for a moment. She opened a PDF. She scrolled. Here it is. She said, paragraph 14. Read it. In the event that a controlling interest is transferred to a lineal descendant, said descendant must demonstrate operational competence and financial literacy. If the transfer results in a material breach of fiduciary duty or endangers the solvency of the entity, any other lineal descendant may petition the trust protector to void the transfer and assume control. Priya looked up at me. Her eyes were wide. Sarah, this is a nuclear option. What does it mean? I asked. Though I already knew, it means you can sue. Priya said, you can prove Madison is incompetent, which she admitted publicly, and you can prove your father breached his duty by taking the predatory loan. You can petition the court to void the transfer to Madison and install you as the trustee and majority owner. I stared at the screen. I could take it, all of it. I could walk into that office, slap a court order on the desk, and fire my mother. I could evict my father. I could take the keys from Madison. I would win. The law was on my side. The evidence was overwhelming. But what would be left? I would be the Queen of Ash. My parents would be destitute and humiliated. They would hate me with a purity that would last the rest of their lives. Madison would be collateral damage, publicly branded as incompetent by her own sister. The community would see it as a ruthless coup. I looked at the document. It was a weapon. Grandpa had left me a loaded gun. "What do you want to do?" Priya asked softly. I walked to the window. I looked out at the harbor. The gulls were circling the fishing boats, screaming for scraps. "If I do this," I said, "I become exactly what Mom says I am. Cold. Ruthless. If you do not," Priya said, "the business might fail." "It might." I said, Or what? Or Madison might learn to swim." I turned back to Priya. "Close the file," I said. "Sarah, close it. I am not going to sue my family. I am not going to use the law to force them to love me or respect me." Priya closed the laptop. "Okay, so what is the play?" "The play is boundaries," I said. I waited until evening. The sun had set, and the warehouse was dark. Except for the security lights. My parents had gone home, exhausted and sullen. Madison was still there. She was sitting on the dock behind the warehouse, her legs dangling over the edge, watching the tide go out. I walked out and sat next to her. The wood of the dock was rough against my legs. The smell of low tide was strong, salt and decay and life. "Did you find a way to fix it?" Madison asked, without looking at me. "I found a way." I said, "But I'm not going to use it." She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I could take the company. Madison, Grandpa put a clause in the trust. I could sue you and Mom and Dad, and I would win. I could take it all." Madison went still. She stared at the black water. "Why don't you?" she whispered. "You would be better at it." "Because I do not want to be the jailer," I said, "and I do not want to destroy what is left of us." She picked at a splinter in the wood. "I am sorry." "Sarah," she said. Her voice was thick with tears. "I know." I said, "No, you don't. I am not sorry about the money or the title. I am sorry because I let them make me into a shield. I knew Mom was jealous of you. I knew Dad was scared of you, and I let them hide behind me because it felt good to be the favorite for once." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I always felt stupid next to you," she admitted. "You were always the one with the gold stars, the one with the plan. I just wanted to be important." "You are important," I said. "You are my sister." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, listening to the water lap against the pilings. It was the first honest moment we had shared in 20 years. "So what do we do?" she asked. "I am leaving." "Madison." She sat up. "What?" "I am going back to Boston. I am not going to be the director of operations. I am not going to work for Mom and Dad. I cannot save them from themselves, but the bank. Here is the deal," I said. I pulled a folder from my bag. "I have written a stabilization plan. It is a step-by-step guide. Who to call at the credit union, which inventory to liquidate, how to structure the payments." I handed it to her. "You have to do it." I said, "You, not Dad, not Mom. You have to make the calls." "I am scared," she said. "Be scared." I said, "And do it anyway. That is what the work is." "And regarding Trent," I added, "Priya drafted a formal agreement. If you sign it, I will act as an external consultant for 90 days. I will answer your questions. I will review the numbers, but I will bill you. My hourly rate is $200. $200? Madison's eyes widened. "Friends and family discount." I said, "Standard is $300. And there is one condition." "What?" "Mom and Dad are not allowed in the meetings. Just you and me. If Elaine walks in, I walk out. If Robert tries to hide a bill, I quit. Total transparency." Madison looked at the folder. She looked at the dark water. She looked at me. She took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. "I can do that." She took the folder. I stood up and brushed the dust off my skirt. "I am going to start my own firm." I said, "Foster Logistics Consulting." "You are using the name?" Madison asked. "It is my name too," I said, "and I'm going to build something that doesn't have rot in the foundation." I walked her to her car. We hugged. It wasn't the fake, perfumed hug of our mother. It was a real hug. Awkward, tight, and desperate. "Good luck, boss," I said. "Don't call me that," she laughed. A watery sound. I drove back to Boston that night. The highway was empty. I rolled the windows down and let the cold air rush in. I thought about the ending of the story. I hadn't gotten the justice I thought I wanted. I hadn't seen my mother beg for forgiveness. I hadn't seen my father suddenly grow a spine. I hadn't reclaimed the throne. But as I watched the city skyline rise up ahead of me, glittering in the dark, I realized I had won something better. I had won my freedom. I wasn't the ungrateful daughter anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the savior. I was Sarah Foster. And for the first time in my life, I was driving toward a future that belonged entirely to me. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the difficult, messy reality of family loyalty and personal integrity. I hope Sarah's choice resonated with you. We would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own peace? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption. Until next time.